Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Trading the Markets. I'm Bijan Maleki, and of course, I'm joined by Kris Bullock, aka Blasto Plas. Want to thank Nico for stepping in last week and hosting. We didn't miss a beat. I was moving and I'm back. I'm living in my parents' house right now, staying true to the culture of that degen trading in their parents' basement with meme coins. So that's me. That's my life right now. Hey, we're in the final stretch here in the banana zone, hopefully, right? So we gotta get that going. Just want to call your attention to a new Jamie Coots video that just dropped, cycle modeling and risk framework. Basically, those videos act like a supplement to his May reports. So I think it's also a great resource to use in tandem with our weekly trading shows. So if you're an RV Pro member, go and check that out. Kris has his crypto portfolio update dropping next week as well. But you can also check out Joe Bland's macro portfolio coming this week. So set your reminders for that. You'll need to be an RV Connect member to get access. So if you're not already, make sure you upgrade so you can get access to that. Because with RV Connect, you don't just get Kris's amazing and detailed reports and our weekly trading show. You'll also get those detailed macro reports and videos from Joe Bland. You get full access to trade ideas, and you get access to the Crypto Academy. And I know Kris has a few sessions in there. There's a famous saying, about the student becoming the teacher. So you can learn from Kris. Maybe you can trade better than him and TA better than him. We'll see how that goes. Also, just want to have a quick reminder as well. We discuss this all day, every day in our Discord. So if you're not a member, you can always join, stress test your ideas, chat with your fellow members. And just join the vibes in Discord. And if you have any questions for us this week, you can always drop them in the chats here on X or on the platform, and we'll get to as many as we can. And lastly, we have another RV meetup coming to you guys in London again on June 18th. So if you're in the area or you need a reason to be in the UK, we hope to see you there. You can register at realvision.com/meetups. Again, that's realvision.com/meetups. So you can register for our event and check out our events calendar. Anyway, let's get into the week. Kris, how are you doing? What's on your mind today?
I am doing great. I wanted to actually piggyback on something you just said about the meetups. It's not quite, I don't know if it's officially on the schedule yet, and maybe I shouldn't be announcing it, but there's going to be one in Vancouver in August, in around the 15th or 16th, which I am going to, which myself and Blasto's girlfriend will be attending in Vancouver. So I hope to see anybody that wants to go to that. That's going to be a lot of fun. It will also be my 50th birthday on the 15th that weekend. So should be a good time.
All right, a birthday party slash meetup for Blastoplas. Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait. We got our tickets already this weekend, and so I'm stoked for that. I haven't been to Vancouver either, so I'm looking forward to it. Um, I wanted to also quickly touch on the reports that you mentioned. Jamie's last two reports. I mean, all of his reports are good, but his last two were just fire. Like they were so good with this new risk modeling profile that he's come up with, and just so in depth. And the stuff that he does with the data is just, I mean, again, it's above and beyond anything that I've seen from anybody in this space. And we're so grateful to have him. And I really liked Joe's report too. I'm not deep in the weeds with TradFi, and I thought his report was outstanding. And it really, like, as soon as I read this, I was like, I can see myself, leveraging this information, maybe later in the cycle or next year or something when I want to kind of branch out of crypto a bit. His reports are going to be super, super helpful in that scenario, and I look forward to seeing those evolve. I thought that that was a really welcome addition to all of the content that we have. We didn't really have anything that what he's bringing to the table, and it was unique, and props to Joe for that. So it was good
Yeah.
stuff.
And I'd be
Um,
remiss if I didn't say that that also was born from community feedback. So like we listened to what a lot of you say, and that's what a lot of you wanted. You love that crypto aspect of what we're providing, but I think we were lacking a little bit more on a macro side of things, and that's what Bland brings to the table. So
yeah,
keep your recommendations and feedback coming. We'd love to hear it.
yeah. So yeah, let's get onto Bitcoin here. Let's start with Bitcoin rather. So we've been in a correction, as we know, for what, a little over a week now. And the question is the bottom in? That's kind of what we're all waiting for. Is the bottom in? Do we have another leg down? Are we going to reverse? Have we corrected enough? And so let's kind of look at some charts here and sort of see what I see. Right now, what I'm looking at is the first question: has Bitcoin corrected enough? If I'm not mistaken, it's down. It ultimately went down about 8.5%, give or take. So yes, there's been a couple other corrections in this current 4-year cycle that we're in that were actually slightly shallow, or maybe one was around 9%, one was around 8%. So it wouldn't be unprecedented for this to have been a big enough correction. You could ask yourself, has sentiment corrected enough? Like usually when we come into these corrections that we have right now, you want to see sentiment kind of get flushed out, because what happens is we get these big, overexcited, overexuberant rallies where, like the fear and greed index goes to like 70 plus, and we're like, this is great, but we can't sustain a 70 plus fear and greed, it doesn't work that way. And so usually when you get these corrections, you want to see sentiment get reset back down into like, say, the 50s or 40s even, and kind of freak everybody out and kind of get reset so that you have enough sort of fuel to sustain another big rally. And we didn't quite get that. We've got a sentiment flush. I want to say it's back down in like the 60s. So it's still a little bit on the greed side of things. It's not quite, neutral even. And so that's never awesome, but also, it is what it is. And if this is to be the next big phase of the banana zone, then it'll be okay. It's fine. Now, so that leads us to, is the bottom in? Well, there's a couple good things that I'm seeing here, and I'm looking at this trading alpha indicator, which I use a lot and is great. And it's showing us that it has basically managed to hold this support level through this entire correction. I mean, it did wick down briefly and came right back up, and it's held it. And now we've got the shaded area here, and the shaded area tells us that that the Bollinger Bands are starting to kind of come together or squeeze. And this is what we refer to as a volatility squeeze, meaning there hasn't been a lot of price action, since this sideways structure started. And so now it's starting to get squeezed. And typically when you get a volatility squeeze, you have a breakout. Like if you look at these other couple like we had one here, a volatility squeeze, and now this broke out to the downside. We had another one here, this one broke out to the upside. This volatility squeeze doesn't tell you which way price is going to break out. It just tells you that typically when you have a period of low volatility, you often get a period of high volatility breaking out from it, is effectively what it's saying. So this could go either way, but I feel like the longer it goes sideways like this and the longer it holds this support level, the odds increase that the breakout will be to the upside. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at here. And then if we go over to this other indicator, this other chart rather, same thing. We're still looking at Bitcoin here, but just with moving averages. Right now we're basically, again, in the same support cluster that we've been holding. And we're really just waiting for Bitcoin, I think, to get back above these two moving averages, this 10 and 20-day moving average. And as soon as they do that, that's going to tell us that, yes, in fact, the bottom is in. Now, right now we're a bit in kind of no man's land. We're sort of between support and resistance in terms of these moving averages and this horizontal support level. So we're really just waiting for the market to kind of show its hand and tell us which way things are going. And we can't really do anything until we get that signal. Now, if we don't get the signal to the upside, what does that look to the downside? What does that look like? So the next couple levels I'm looking at are, well, the next big sort of horizontal support level is this previous structure we had down here in like the mid 90s, where it topped out around 96 and it got down as low as 93.5. I don't think we're going to get all the way down to here. To me, that's a bit of a long shot, but it's still sort of within reason. And even if it did happen, it wouldn't necessarily like break the longer term structure or anything like that. Like it really would be fine. Nobody's going to want to see that, obviously, but it would absolutely serve to flush out sentiment, for sure. This would flush sentiment back into the 30s and 40s, and that would be a nice, healthy reset, honestly. But if it doesn't get back to this, the next level I'm looking at is kind of this even 100,000 level, which is like the even sort of nice psychological round number level. Humans are funny like that. They like to buy at round numbers, and so you could very well see a bounce just at 100K if it does get down to this low. Just because, again, that's humans for you. So That's the number I'm kind of looking at. If we break this existing structure, first I'll look at 100,000. If we do lose it, which we could, then the next structure down I'm looking at is around 96. And if we kind of zoom out, you can see what I'm saying by when I say it wouldn't actually break anything. Because just looking at the longer term, like the longer term, 4-year cycle trend that we've been on starting from, back in 2023, January 23, we're still quite a ways above this existing sort of long-term trend line that we've been holding. And we did, the April lows when we broke out from that was the previous touch we had to this trend line. And meanwhile, we've got the 20-week moving average, which is effectively this bull market support band running down through here. And we're still quite a ways above that. So if you look at this, we're way above the trend line. We're way above the bull market support band. So even a correction down to 95 wouldn't even get us back anywhere near this trend line. So that's what I mean when I say everything would be fine structurally if we were to come down that low. And so I'm really not worried about that if it did happen, even though I don't necessarily think it will, or maybe it's not my base case, you could say. So that's where we're at with Bitcoin. Overall, I think things are looking good. I do think that there's a 50-50 chance, even better maybe, that the bottom actually is in, and we do get, start a new, basically a 60-day cycle rally out of here sometime this week. But in the meantime, we're just kind of stuck, and we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah.
you touched on this on Monday as well. Like, if we break down under 100, we're okay, guys. Like, that mid 90s is still nice support. It's gonna flush us out, and I think that'll just provide great buying opportunities. I know crypto Twitter is gonna go crazy if we do go
Yeah.
below 100, but that is your guys' opportunity. So just
Yeah.
keep that in mind. It's the world's not falling just yet. There, Kris, you had an interesting chart as well showing altcoins because we think we're always talking about this alt season coming and that just taking us to the moon and seeing all these exponential gains. But this the altcoin chart performance that you have is really just really kind of puts things into perspective about where we currently are right now. You want to kind of explain what you're seeing on that chart?
Yeah, so this is on CoinMarketCap. They have like an altcoin index or an alt season index, and this basically shows the number of tokens that are outperforming Bitcoin on a rolling 90-day basis. And right now, in this moment, there's only 22 altcoins that have done so. And it's funny, if you look at these, there's a lot of really common names that you hear. You hear Fartcoin a lot, you hear SPX, you hear Hype, you hear Virtual. They're all right up at the top here. A few others that kind of, Aave has been talked about, Tau gets talked about a fair bit. Even ETH, actually, surprisingly, has outpaced Bitcoin over the last 90 days, which you haven't been able to say too many times in the last few years. So that was nice to see. But the thing with this list, it very much speaks to the fact that Bitcoin remains supremely dominant because like how many, I think this is top 100. Okay, so this is just out of the top 100. Now, we know there's literally thousands of other crypto assets. You can't really factor those in so much because they have such tiny market caps that they can swing wildly and on any given moment, any one of them could outpace Bitcoin in a short term, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily good investments. So you kind of want to stick to like the top 100. And even so, less than a quarter of them are outpacing Bitcoin. And even within that, I think there's some nuance that I want to speak to because like you have to keep in mind, like ETH is a perfect example. Yes, ETH has outpaced Bitcoin over the last 90 days. And so if you looked at that just in black and white terms, you would think, oh, well, ETH is probably a good investment. Like maybe I need to be in ETH right now. But if you kind of dig a little bit deeper, and you go to this chart here, you'll see that ETH, in fact, has been in a long-term downtrend against Bitcoin for the last 4 years. So yes, it's outpaced it in the last 90 days, but there's a fair number of those assets on that list I just showed where maybe this is kind of what you're seeing. It's in a very long-term downtrend, but maybe over the last 90 days it had a big spike and kind of outperformed it in a shorter term. Now that's not all of them, but you have to dig into the chart actually and kind of double check those numbers and make sure that one of those assets that you might be looking to buy isn't just in a long-term downtrend with a more short-term spike. So it's good to look at this as a reference because it does give you a good perspective on just again how dominant Bitcoin is. And there are some here that are absolutely worth holding that have been outpacing Bitcoin on a much longer term. But the point is, Bitcoin is good. Like, there's nothing wrong with holding Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's probably going to do better than most. You know what's not in this list? In this top 20 here, is the likes of Solana or Sui, or a lot of other big, large assets that many of us talk about, that many of us are holding for the long term. They're not here. So, I think that's something that's worth paying attention to. So yeah, yeah, good
Yeah, I
list.
mean that's it's definitely an interesting chart to see because we just get caught up so much in these alts. I think and a theme that kind of occurred on our Monday show too is I think listen, if you want to have a relatively stress-free, I put that in quotes because we're in crypto, right? Just buy Bitcoin, right? And just set it and forget it. And you won't have to worry about monitoring it every day, worrying about these crazy swings because in the long run, you're going to be up, right? If you want to dive into the weeds and really focus on outperforming Bitcoin, well, then that's where you want to start diving into these meme coins or I mean altcoins. But I also think it's important to know is it needs to outperform Bitcoin significantly, I think, for it to be worth the stress and the risk of holding that alt. Because for something like 5 to 10% outperformance of Bitcoin, yeah, you're outperforming Bitcoin, but is it worth all the hassle and time that you're putting into it just to get such a minimal gain where you could have just held the larger asset and just enjoyed your life and touched some grass? So I think that's something to consider when you're thinking about your portfolio.
It's funny. I actually touched on that. I posted a big post in the Discord just a little bit ago before the show. Um, and it was kind of speaking to just that. Like, you have to kind of remember, now obviously this is anecdotal, but like, probably 9 out of 10 people that try to outpace Bitcoin end up doing worse than if they just held Bitcoin. And I know a lot of people come into crypto thinking, oh yeah, okay, there's Bitcoin and it's cool, but what if it's probably only gonna do what, a 2 or 3x or 4x, from here? That's boring. That's stupid. I don't want that. I want the gains. I want the 10x. Well, it's fine to want the 10x. You can want the 10x all you want, but in order to get that 10x, you actually have to work for it. You have to do better than Bitcoin. And that's far easier said than done. You can want the 10x all day long, but you have to execute, and you have to go way out the risk curve, and it's risky out there. I mean, Bitcoin itself, like you said, is already very risky. And so you have to be in a position to be able to be looking at charts. You have to be very tactful. You have to know what you're looking for. From an analytics perspective, you have to have the time to be able to sit in front of these charts and stare at them and know what's going on, and be in a position to actually click the buy and sell button in the right times and places. And if that's not your thing, if you don't have, I mean, maybe you have the want, but you need the actual time. Like, if you've got a full-time day job and you only look at charts maybe once a day for 10 minutes, you're probably not positioning yourself to outpace Bitcoin, no matter how much you might want to. You can't just like buy, whatever deep and lo-fi or whatever, and just set it and forget it and go, well, I'm good. I got my 10x. I'm going to outpace Bitcoin. It doesn't work that way. Like, it's a far more active process to actually be able to achieve that. And if you don't think that you can, or you don't think that you are, just have the resources or the time to be able to do that, there's nothing wrong with just holding Bitcoin. Like, just kind of go with your strength, and like, you're far better off going with your strength and succeeding than going with your weakness and failing. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and if you heard all of that and you said, you know what, I still want to outperform Bitcoin and I still want to chase generational wealth. Well, guys, we do have some nice portfolios, our crypto portfolio. We have Joe Bland's portfolio, Jamie Coots's portfolio, Raoul's portfolio. So you guys can, play along with those and, just update your portfolio as those updates come and you'll probably do really well too. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
You will do well, but I want to just say, what you will do well, but just know that, like, none of us being the experts, Joe, myself, Raoul, Julian, we don't have a crystal ball either. Like, we've got experience, we've got some expertise in terms of analytics and knowledge of macro and cycles and crypto and everything, but we can refine the probabilities to ensure greater odds of success. But again, anything can happen. I mean,
Yeah.
anything can happen. you know.
Great point. Great little caveat there, Kris. So I know you wanted to you touched on ETH a little bit here as you were going through
Yeah.
these altcoins. I know you wanted to talk about the ETH chart, but I want to tie that in with a question that we got from Miles. Hi, Kris. Should I swap my XRP or Tau for ETH or keep the faith a little bit longer? So why don't we dive into that ETH chart and maybe see what we can tell Miles here.
Well, so actually, here's ETH. Let me kind of first zoom out and let's look at ETH on a zoomed out perspective for just a second. So this is ETH USD pair. This was way back at sort of the cycle lows back in 2022. ETH ran a decent, it was in a nice uptrend against USD for most of the cycle. I mean, really until this year, honestly, it was in a solid uptrend. Now, granted, it didn't really set any higher highs once it peaked initially in early 2024, but it was setting higher lows. And it was like, okay, yeah, it's not outpacing Bitcoin, but it's still going up. And so I'll take that. But then, when the big correction happened at the beginning of this year, it just lost this whole structure. I mean, it blew the trend out, immediately was in a major downtrend all of a sudden. And it hasn't quite yet recovered. You can see this long-term trend line is still, price is still below that trend line. However, we got the upgrade and we got this big bounce based on the upgrade, and this is really what it needed. I mean, the reason it was going down as much as it was is because its fundamentals were frankly all out of whack, and the Ethereum Foundation was not guiding the ship very well. They weren't necessarily being the best stewards of this project, and they had a change of leadership, and they made some big upgrades, and we're seeing price reflect this. And honestly, I was expecting this to roll over a bit after this big uptrend here, this big candle rather. And to my surprise, to my pleasant surprise, it's managed to hold it pretty well. Now, if we kind of zoom in a little bit on the daily, it's basically broken up kind of into the middle of this range. We had this low that was set down here at 1500, and then the highs that were around the 3800 level, and it's kind of hovering right in the middle. It sort of reclaimed the middle of this sideways range that it was in. But again, to my pleasant surprise, it has held it as support, and it hasn't really corrected all that much, like, well, Bitcoin has, like in the last whatever week plus. Like Bitcoin peaked out and has lost its uptrend structure a little bit. I'm going to kind of zoom in to highlight these moving averages. We didn't really get a crossover of the moving averages on the daily time frame like we did on pretty much all the majors, like Solana, SWI, Bitcoin. All of those other ones rolled over and had crossovers, like bearish crossovers on the daily. Ethereum has managed to keep its structure. It's managed to keep its uptrend, and the two moving averages are kind of just like hovering right along with each other right now. But to me, ETH looks strong. And like if you compare it just briefly to the likes of Solana, again, Solana rolled over, much more of a correction. It's below its bull market support band now, and moving average crossover to the downside, it got effectively rejected at its resistance level. Whereas, again, looking at ETH real quick, ETH is above it. ETH is above the support band, so better. And then SWI, same thing. Now, SWI was a little bit better off because it sort of went higher to begin with, so it's still above its support band, but it too rolled over and had a bearish crossover on its moving averages. And again, so did Bitcoin. Not quite as drastic, but it technically did. So just in sort of black and white terms, looking at ETH, it looks pretty good, honestly. It looks halfway decent right now. Like it's holding these gains. It didn't turn around and give this whole big thrust back, and I like seeing that. So. I guess to answer the question, would I swap XRP and what else was it?
Tau.
Tau. Well, I don't know. It's tricky. Like the question you have to ask yourself is how much, what's the upside potential of those assets, I think, compared to ETH right now? Do I think ETH will go up from here? Yeah. I think maybe it could even get back up to the top of this range. Real quick, you go back to this ETH Bitcoin chart. We really need to see ETH start setting higher highs against Bitcoin, which it's got a ways to go still before it gets to that point. Like, yes, it's starting to flip this weekly trend against Bitcoin, but it's not really even close to setting a higher high yet, back up at this other yellow line here. So ETH, as good as it's doing, still hasn't shown that it's going to be the runner. for the remainder of the cycle, for the next 6 months or whatever that means. SPX though, or XRP rather, I'm sorry, it's kind of rolling over too. Like it doesn't look great either. Yeah, it had this big run, and yes, it's held most of it, and yes, it's held this structure, but it's technically also had a rollover on its moving averages. It's technically also sort of under its bull market support band, so it's looking more like SWE in that regard than ETH does. And then Tau's different because it's a much smaller market cap than both of these, like by tens of or by billions, I mean, rather.
Yeah.
So it still has a lot more upside. And Tau has some good stuff going for it right now. So I think just even though Tau is not going to turn into ETH, Tau's not going to be the next Ethereum or the next XRP or anything like that. But in terms of like, does Tau have more mathematical upside right now in this moment than Ethereum does? Quite possibly, yes. But at the same time, it goes back to what we were just saying earlier about the risk curve. Tau is much further out the risk curve than Ethereum. And so while Tau has maybe a chance of going higher, it also has a higher chance of going lower. Like the odds are, if you get it wrong and Tau loses favor for whatever reason, because it's comparatively smaller market cap, it could nuke right before your eyes, and unless you're sitting in front of your computer, you might not be able to catch it. Whereas ETH isn't going to drop 50% in a week, like Tau could potentially. And so that's it kind of comes into your risk profile, and sort of if that makes sense for you. Personally, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
and I
hard for
would
me
say
to say yes, do this, without it sounding like financial advice. Like,
right. And I would say too for you, Miles, it also really depends, like kind of what we touched on at the top of the show is like how often are you going to be able to watch this, especially with something like a
right,
tau, right? Because you're really going to want to you're really going to want to watch that chart to one, get the timing right, and then one also make sure you don't lose your shirt on the downside of the volatility of that. So I would say ask yourself that question, because it might seem, especially with ETH showing really nice strength, might seem you might want to just or an XRP too. I mean, might seem
yeah.
you may want to just hold on to it because it seems like you've been doing pretty well so far, as opposed to switching into something more volatile like Tau. But ETH, you can't really deny the chart and that it is showing some nice strength there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, actually, you were actually touching on Sol and Sui when we were talking about this ETH chart. So I do want to take this question from Rob. Should I swap Sol for Sui? Seems it bounced from the low.
Um, so the risky run there is as soon as you swap your soul for SWE, Solana's going to go on a huge run, and you're going to kick yourself. And that I've seen that happen. I don't know how many times in the Discord over the last year and a half, where, oh, I swapped all my soul to SWE and it just blew up. And now I wish I would have just stayed put. You have to remember, not all of these assets sort of go up and down at the same time. They kind of will go in their own individual cycles. And one week, Sol might go up. The next week, SWE might go up. And particularly those two, I feel like not that they always do the opposite of one another, but again, you're introducing a lot more risk into your whole situation by swapping back and forth between these assets, semi often. I think that, just kind of have both. I mean, if you don't know which one to be in, just have a chunk of both. I mean, that's kind of how I modeled the model portfolio, because I myself don't know the answer. I think both of these I could make an argument for both of these doing really well going into the next, phase of the cycle, the rest of the banana zone, whatever you want to call it. And so that's why I just have both. And eventually one will ultimately do better than the other, but right now today, I can't tell you which one it's going to be. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like, there's something to say about SWE being lower on the market cap and having a better upside potential this cycle. But I do agree with you holding both. I hold both. I think SWE makes up about 45 to, 48% of my portfolio. Solana's in that 22% range. And I don't think I'm touching that, to
Yeah.
be honest with you, because
Yeah.
I'm like you, Kris. I have that fear that the minute I do something like that, the one that I sold is going to run. So I'm just going to kind of stay put there.
Yeah, yeah. That's like how you get chopped up, basically, is suddenly you switch from one to the other, and in the end you end up with less, of both or something. And
Right.
it's just like, well, what was the point of that? And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So why don't we you had another chart to show. I think you were talking about SPX. You mentioned it too. SPX has just been on an absolute tear as well. Like
Yeah.
how can you not have at least a little all of you asking what you should maybe convert to or swap this and that. I think at the very least, maybe just a little chunk at the least into SPX because I mean you cannot deny this chart.
You can't deny the chart. And you know how I was just showing you like the Bitcoin, the even the Ethereum, Solana, SWI, XRP, all of those. Remember how all of those were basically rolling over on these moving averages? The green was crossed over the red and they were rolling over. They were all below their bull market support band or at it. If you look at SPX here, it's not doing any of those. I mean, not only is it not rolling over, but both of these moving averages are pointed sharply to the upside, and they're continuing to diverge further and further apart, signaling, that the uptrend is actually gaining strength. And so, and if you look at the series of higher highs and higher lows going way back to, well, I mean, even going back to March here, even this is kind of ridiculous at this point. Like, yes, I know Bitcoin has already reached its all-time high since the low, and clearly SPX has not. So, but out of the lows, SPX has actually outpaced Bitcoin by over 3x. It's done a 3x on Bitcoin out of these lows. And so, and it's rapidly closing back in on its all-time high right here that it set back in January. And it doesn't really look like it's slowing down. I mean, even we had this big correction, Bitcoin is still in sort of correction mode. SPX is setting higher highs right now while the rest of the market is red. Bitcoin's red, SWI's red, XRP's red. SPX is up 10% today. Like what? You know, like this again, it warrants consideration. Again, I'm not saying go all out. I'm not saying full port into SPX. By all means, don't. Even though Murad would kill me for saying that because I'm sure he probably he's not full into SPX. He's got some other stuff too, but have some exposure to this. I know it's a meme coin, whatever, but like memes are legit and memes are a valid sector, and this one isn't. This one is outpacing everything right now. Going back to that altcoin list, it's right here. I mean, yes, Fartcoin is up a little bit more. Fartcoin actually kind of rolled over a little bit. Of all of these, SPX looks the best. Like over the weekend, I went through, I have all these watch lists, that show Bitcoin pairs, USD pairs. It breaks it down into memes, it breaks it down into all these different asset classes or sectors within crypto. And of these, I probably went through 100 charts. SPX looked the best out of all of them, like legit against Bitcoin and against USD. So, I mean, the scoreboard. I say that all the time, but just the scoreboard. It is what it is. You want to pick a fast horse? This is a fast horse. So.
Yeah. And SPX has been atop of the scoreboard for some time, top of the attention economy for some time. And that's what memes are, right? An attention economy with rabid communities behind them that just hold these things
The
up.
most rabid community. Go on X and search for hashtag XPX6900 and just look at what you see out there. It's people that are full cult mode. I mean, they're not talking about price. They're just like, this is my new religion. Like that's the sort of mindset that you're seeing from these people. And like that's what takes a meme to the top is that kind of like insanity, honestly. Like there's all these other ones. Oh, it's a cute cat, or it's a cute dog, or it's funny, or it's a silly fart joke, or yeah, okay, cool. But like those aren't cults, those aren't like, this is my new religion, like, and so that's why SPX is doing as well as it is, because that's the kind of mindset that it requires for the level of success that we think it can achieve. And it's showing that. And so I'm gonna bet on that, I'm gonna bet not everything, but I'm betting on it because it's doing what it needs to do.
So that being said, would you say now is a good time as any to get into SPX, or would you maybe suggest waiting for a little bit of a pullback? I mean, I know there's always a risk waiting for a pullback that just never comes, or if it does come, it's going to be higher than what it is now. But what are your kind of your thoughts on somebody who may not have some SPX but wants some exposure in this moment?
So yeah, sure. We can look at it. What we can see is it does have its share of pullbacks. It's not up only, which is also really good. You don't necessarily want it to be up only because usually the stuff that goes up only turns around and goes down only. You want to see these like slow grinding, slightly higher highs, slightly higher lows kind of pattern like this. Like this is like the most ideal scenario. And so you can see, yeah, it does come down. However, it kind of just did come down. So like it set this peak back here when the market topped, and it came back all the way down. It did a 30% correction all the way back down to this sort of support level that had been established. Like it was at a resistance level. It took about 6 days to finally break through this. It kept waking up above it, and then we had the breakout, which is good. And it was a classic breakout pattern. We had a breakout, immediately came down, retested the breakout level twice, and then went on further continuation to the upside. That's you want to see that. That when you see that, you're like, this is classic breakout pattern. It's going to go up. So I love that. So it might not be, you might have missed the boat, I guess, in terms of like a recent buy, but you can see it does do its share of corrections. So it could come back down to, well, I don't know if it's going to come all the way back down to the 92-cent level. It may come back down to $1, give or take, which is right around where the 10-day moving average is. It may just kind of go sideways. What I would do for now with SPX is just wait until the next time it touches the 10-day moving average and then sort of see where it's at from there. Because like if you look, sometimes it'll go sideways like this and sort of wait for the moving average to catch up to it. And then other times it'll kind of reverse all the way down and go through the 10-day all the way to the 20. So if it looks like it's going down and it's red candles down into the moving average, then let it go for a minute and see if it comes all the way to the 20. But if it's just sort of plodding sideways like this and the moving average is rapidly catching up to it, then as soon as you get that touch, that's probably the time to buy, more often than not. So maybe be looking for that. The next time you get a touch on the 10, or the 20 is even better, but the next time you get a touch on the 10, sort of evaluate the structure and go from there. But that's what I would be looking for. And like you said, Bijan, there's every chance that it goes up to 140 between now and then. And right now at 120 is the correction level, and you maybe wish you would have bought anyway. Right. But you don't know. You never know. You never know how it's going to play out.
It's the gift and the curse with memes sometimes. So speaking of memes, I do want to just take this last question from Michal Larson before we end here, because we don't really talk about base very much. Thoughts on the meme coin Toshi on base? I'll give you my quick thoughts, Michal. I think what we just said about SPX, if I had any Toshi or if I was thinking about Toshi, I would just wait for that 10-day moving average on SPX and put it in there instead, because quite frankly, I don't think, and I could be wrong here, but I just don't see base memes having the same, stickiness as, these SPXs, these fart coins, and a lot of these other ones we hear so much about.
Yeah, very well said. I do want to, let's just see kind of what the chart said here. It's generally a pretty decent structure overall. I mean, it's generally grinding upwards, we can see. I wouldn't say it's blowing anything away. Like it's not, I don't know what its market cap is or anything, so I don't really know anything about it. But it's just kind of choppy, sort of herky-jerky price action that's generally grinding in an uptrend. But overall, I don't know that I would want to have this over, say, SPX or any number, Fartcoin, virtuals, rekt, even. There's a handful of others out there that I'm really kind of looking at that I've got a bit of a short list, and I don't know that I would put this on it. This is just kind of average performance, I guess.
Yeah, and one thing that sticks out to me too, on this chart at least, is that volume spike, right? Kind of at the beginning part of the year, you see huge volume spike, and you obviously saw the huge candle go up. But then since then, volume is completely teetered off, if you will, as opposed to like an SPX. While yeah, obviously the volume is lower than some of those huge spikes, but it remained consistently high. So that's something that draws my attention on just the activity level behind base.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. We loved your questions, guys. So always keep them coming. When on the watch back, if you have any questions, just throw them into the chat, and we'll always try to take them on our Monday show or again next week as well. So another great session, Kris. Any thoughts you want to leave us with heading into the end of weekend?
Like I said, I'm just kind of waiting for Bitcoin to show its hand here. Whether it's going to break down below this sideways structure or break up above these moving averages. I think if it closes a day, even better still a week, if it closes the week out above these moving averages, then pretty good chance the low is in, and we're gonna run from there. But in the meantime, we just got to wait and see.
Just wait and see, guys. Stay patient. And we'll see you on Friday for our weekly review show. And we'll see you again on Monday for another live TA session. So make sure you join the Discord if you haven't already. Make sure you sign up for Connect so that you can join that session. And we'll see you guys next time. Have a great one.